Good to see you all. I'm just back after a few weeks of really blessed vacation off in the woods, thinking. And I've been thinking about my life over the last few years. I've been a rabbi now for 3 years. That's not true, actually. I've been a rabbi since 2007 for about 14 years. But I've been in this a community rabbi, a pulpit rabbi. I've been at Ikar for 3 years now, and I didn't really feel like a rabbi until I took this job as a teacher. But now I'm a rabbi, and it's such a privilege. People are so nice to you when you're the rabbi. I mean, most of the time. Sometimes not. But it's like, hi, Rabbi. Hi. I often say it's a little bit like being famous in one room. Like if you watch Cheers, which I did when I was a kid. There's a guy on Cheers, Norm, and whenever Norm comes in, Norm, right? So it's a little bit like being Norm, Rabbi. Everybody's happy to see you in that bar. But the real privilege of being a rabbi is the access that you get to people, to people's life. People let you into their homes, into their hospital rooms, into family secrets and hidden places in their hearts, and that's a big deal. That's sacred ground. And people really listen to what you say when you're a rabbi. They take it seriously, and they look sometimes to you for guidance. They invest you with a certain amount of authority, and I have to admit that part of it is always rested a little uncomfortably on my shoulders, because why me? Don't listen to me, right? Because I know I'm just some guy. Like I'm the dope I wake up with every morning. So I know that I'm no smarter or holier than I was 3 years ago. Nobody cared what I had to say back then. So I don't know. Like it just feels a little weird. But maybe I should just own it. Right? That's because the truth is that's always been, to a certain extent, the role of the rabbi. The rabbi tells you what to do. The rabbi's job was to know Torah profoundly, and to be able to interpret it and tell you how to keep Torah, how to live. The word rav, we get the English rabbi from. We often translate as teacher, but really, technically, it means master. My master. Should start going by that, right? That's nice. But there's something to it. We invest rabbis with a tremendous amount of authority, and I do too. I have rabbis, and I treat them that way as well. But it's classically it's legal authority. It's the authority to shape a society, to tell us what to do. So where does that come from? I mean, who gave these old guys all these years ago the right to tell me how to observe the law of the Torah, and even to legislate, even to come up with new laws? Okay, well, the source for Rabbinic Authority is in our Parsha. You can find it on page 1090 if you want to take a look. The Parsha is called Shoftim, so it's already heading there. That means judges, and it's an important Parsha. It is the Parsha where we begin to speak of an entire justice system, an entire court system. And in the midst of that, there at the last line there on page 1090, the Torah says, Ki yipalem mimcha davar lemishpat. If a case is too baffling for you, if you can't figure out what to do, then you shall promptly repair. It says, to the place that the Lord your God will have chosen. You should go and appear before the priests. Go up to the temple and appear before the priest or the judge. And that sounds like, just back then when they had a temple and priest and judge. But the verse actually says, Hashofet asher yeh bayamim ahem. The judge that will be there in those days, which the tradition comes to understand, the rabbis come to understand, as whatever judge is present in whatever day you are living. So whoever the judge is at that time, that's the person that you go and you ask them, what do I do? What do I do? So they have the authority to tell you. And in fact, the Rambam, Maimonides, says in Hilchot Mamrim that we have to follow the rulings of the courts, and he cites verse 11 here. Verse 11, which is, you shall act in accordance with the instructions, with the Torah that is given to you and the ruling handed down to you. Right? And then it says, lo tasur min hadavar asher yagidu lecha yamim usmol. You must not deviate from the verdict that they announce to you, either to the right or to the left. And the Rambam says that, so you have to follow their interpretations of the law, but not just that. Any gzerot, takanot, minhagim, any decrees or even customs that they tell you that you have to follow, you have to follow. So with that, rabbinic authority, a whole world of rabbinic authority is born. That's why I get to tell you what to do. But what's that? If you heard, there's a little phrase at the end there that's curious. You shall not deviate from the verdict that they announce to you, yamin usmo, either to the right or to the left. What's right and left? What's that got to do with it? So now here's where things start to get really crazy, okay? Because Rashi, our most famous commentator, 11th century French commentator, says, do not deviate from what they tell you, right or left. What does that mean? That means, that is, even if they say to you, afil yamrim lecha, that right is left and left is right. All the more so if they tell you that right is right and left is left. But even if they tell you that right is left and left is right, you have to follow what they say. And that's a wild thing to say. Even if you know what the rabbis are saying is wrong, if it contradicts your very understanding of reality, of what's right and wrong, of what's true and false, you have to listen to them. Now that's troubling. I mean, why would I listen to a rabbi who was telling me something wrong? Who's telling me something I knew to be untrue? So this is a famous statement because Rashi said it, and so the centuries of commentators kick it around and try to figure it out. And one version, it's the version that I heard a lot when I studied in the more Haredi world. One version is given by the Nachmanides, the Ramban, 13th century rabbi, a Spanish rabbi, and he says here the thing is the idea here that Rashi is trying to express is that even if you think in your heart that they're wrong, and it's as obvious to you as the difference between right and left, do as they command. Right? You might say to yourself, "How can I eat this? This is treif. Right? This is a cheeseburger. I know I'm not supposed to eat this." Or more serious, how can we kill this innocent person? You might think so, but nevertheless, do as they command, for the Spirit of God rests upon the ministers of God's sanctuary. And God will never remove this kindness from them, and they will always be protected from error or stumbling. So don't worry, we're always right. Right? You're wrong. You're wrong. So respect my authority. Respect my authority. So that's sort of terrifying. The idea that there are these people out there who are always right, and they're backed by the Holy Writ. That sort of society is frightening, I think, to us. We have a lot of examples of how that goes wrong. But, maybe there's a different way to understand this Rashi. Right is left and left is right. Maybe it's just more pragmatic, it's more practical. Like, we have to have somebody who tells us what the law is. We have to have some common agreement, some kind of rule, so we have to listen to somebody, and these are just the people that we've appointed, and so we're going to let them decide. Just has to be that way, but that's also sort of unnerving, because it means that for the sake of order, we are allowed to undo reality as we know it, to make day night and blue red, and to deny what we know to be fundamentally true. And to live like that is also frightening. So what do we do with this? What do we do with this idea of rabbinic authority and the idea that the authority would be so great that they can tell you to do even the opposite of what you know to be true? So my favorite commentator, the Kli Yakar is Rabbi Shlomo Ephraim Lunshitz of Prague, was the chief rabbi of Prague, and is one of the most philosophically daring of the commentators. The Kli Yakar knows that this has been a problem. He says, "Nitkashu amafarshim." They really, our commentators have not been able to figure this out. Why did Rashi say this? This is such a strong statement. But he says, "Ukfia emet enani roe shum koshi b'davar." But the truth is, I don't see any problem here. I don't see any problem here. Ubiur and the explanation, and he goes on and he says, "Look, we know that there's a whole world of debate in rabbinic literature. Just open up the Talmud and you'll see that on any issue there are going to be rabbis who say it's pure and there are going to be rabbis who say it's impure. Right? We know that every issue is debated in our tradition, and in fact, he cites a requirement that was given to new members of the Sanhedrin, that they be able to mitaher et asheretz, to say that a non-kosher thing, a non-pure thing, was pure. They had to be able to prove something that wasn't true. That was one of the requirements, because they had to be able to get into the other side, to understand the opposite reasoning from the one that you would expect. Right? And the Kli Yakar says that the explanation for this is that for anything which is either impure or pure, there are many ways to view it as pure and many ways to view it as impure. The Torah just calls it pure because there are more ways to see it as pure than impure. And the same is true for something which may be permitted or forbidden, acceptable or unacceptable. And that is why, he says, that is why it is appropriate to accept what the rabbis say, even when they say right is left, because there are also ways to think of it as left. So that's 17th century Prague, but the Kli Yakar sounds like a bit of a postmodernist, doesn't he? Right? Because what he's saying is that there isn't only one truth, at least not from a human perspective, that anything can be seen from multiple vantage points. And so the rabbis are invested with an authority, yes, but it's not the authority to be right. The rabbis have an authority that comes from their study, from their deep study, and hopefully a study that led them to understand multiple perspectives and interpretations, and then to offer one, perhaps the right one, hopefully the right one for the situation at hand. And it occurs to me that more than that, if one of the requirements for becoming a rabbi is that you understand how complicated every issue is, and that you're able to see every issue from multiple perspectives, then one of the things that you are there to teach people is precisely that. Is that everything can be understood from multiple perspectives, and there are always multiple truths and multiple interpretations. The rabbi's job is to show you that we live in a world of uncertainty, of indeterminacy, of mystery. And that's a form of authority that I guess I'm willing to aspire to. That we all, I think, should aspire to study enough, to know our tradition enough that we know precisely where we stand in it. And we know where we stand in it because we know where everyone else stands in it. And we recognize that no one of us holds the entire truth. Because truth, capital T, truth is only with God. We're just down here trying to do the best we can, trying to move forward on this path of life. This path that Rabbi Nachman called a narrow bridge. A narrow bridge, and we're trying to move forward safely and not to veer too far off of the path, to the right or to the left. Shabbat Shalom.